Hello, Laney colleagues. Today, we want to focus on thinking about online and hybrid course design in ways that consider policy implications at both the federal and state level. The goal of this webinar is to give you more insights to specific federal and state legislation that impact the way you design your online and hybrid courses. As a result of this webinar, we will give you specific examples of how you can implement opportunities to address some of the policy implications we will explore. We want to start by talking about the definition of distance education. Distance education is defined by a means of educational opportunities that use one or more of the technologies you see listed on the screen. 1, the internet. 2, one or two-way transmissions through open broadcast, closed circuit, cable, microwave, broadband lines, fiber optics, satellite or wireless communication devices. Or 3, audio conferencing. Or 4, a more dated reference, but this is still noted in this item, video cassettes, DVDs, and CD-ROMs. Now, I want to draw your attention to the first 3 items are referenced to the U.S. Department of Education. The fourth additional component is really added under the definition of California law. Now let's talk about accreditation and the importance of distinguishing distance education from correspondence courses. For accreditation purposes, this is education. Distance education is education delivered in instruction where students are separated from the faculty or institution by discipline. This definition requires sensitive and regular interaction between faculty that either happen synchronously or asynchronously. This modality typically uses a learning management system or some other technology to create an open, two-way interaction with students. Now let's look at how this dramatically differs from correspondence education. Correspondence education is simply defined by providing instructional materials to students by way of mail or electronic transmission. I would argue here that at Laney, we want to spend most of our time developing quality, robust distance education opportunities for students. In addition to thinking about the types of engagement that is required, I want to talk a little bit about Code 55200. This regulation really stipulates that as you look at delivering your online courses, there are both state and federal law that require community colleges to operate all programs and activities in a manner which is accessible to qualified students with disabilities, and the common definition to come in reference to the federal law referenced above, as you will see through the American with Disabilities Act, as well as Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. Let's unpack a little bit more about state and federal compliance issues around ADA. I want to spend some time talking with you about specific references to ADA, and as we have seen these played out as it relates to online education. Let's talk about the importance of addressing accessibility in an online and a hybrid course. First, I want to make a note that it is everyone's responsibility at the institution to make sure that programs, services, and courses are accessible to students with disabilities. We have started to see the emergence of additional court cases and national attention to institutions that potentially violate these responsibilities. The first example of this was the Kindle case of 2009. In the trial, 8 institutions were creating a pilot opportunity to use the Kindle e-reader to determine the effectiveness of engagement in the learning environment. So through the trial, every student in the class got a free Kindle. During this time, if you will recall 2009, Kindle technology was really cutting edge, and one of the trial institutions was Arizona State University. Students at Arizona State that were enrolled in a fall human event course could receive and would receive their task textbooks that were typically bounded books. They were going to receive these on a new Kindle DX instead. The National Federation of the Blind and the American Council of the Blind filed a lawsuit because blind students at the time could not use the device as it was currently configured. In the lawsuit, the group also asked the U.S. Department of Education to examine the candidate appointments, the other appointments of the 5 colleges, and talk with Kindle about the building in technology that translated the digital textbooks and audio that at that point in time, users could only get to the feature through a screen that was not accessible to the blind. It was ironic development because of the technology was really to improve accessibility, but the menu had not been navigatable in an accessible way. And so blind students really did not have the opportunity to be a part of the pilot. As a result of the lawsuit, Arizona State University settled and argued to use devices that were more accessible to blind students if they decided to deploy e-readers in the coming year. The university followed up also in 2010 with a Dear Colleague letter to every college president in the country to demonstrate the importance of considering these sorts of implications around accessibility moving forward and providing highlights of what every institution should know and do. This not only brought national attention to the issues of accessibility, but also had us rethink new technologies and shed early light on things to come in online education. It was also assigned to technology providers such as the Amazon and others that it was critical to make improvement in accessibility of their products. Since the precedent case of Arizona State that I just talked with you about, there have been some additional lawsuits that have come in to the national landscape with big name institutions like Harvard and MIT. If you recall, in 2015, there was a huge movement with Harvard and MIT to create massive open online courses, better known as MOOCs. One of the lawsuits in 2015 focused on these institutions failing to provide closed captioning for a deaf student in an online course, one of the MOOCs that was being offered. So since we know that alternative formats is an important thing to consider, I want to give you a couple of tips. I'm going to use a reference to Blackboard, but any other LMS provider we can discuss. First, tip number 1, alternative formats. When you're adding any new document into your LMS, you must remember to add alternative formats. I encourage you to pick at least 2 formats. This is really pivotal because students who use screen readers sometimes use screen readers that are more dated. When those dated screen readers try to, for instance, take a PDF document that we typically as faculty use to PDF our syllabus or PDF documents that we put in our courses, the screen reader cannot break the PDF to be able to then take the content and read the material to the student. So I would argue that it's really important that you at least create a PDF document and an RTF or a rich text file as an alternative format to the document. So the RTF file is a great alternative in that you could create the PDF, you could upload that, then you go back and when you do your save as, you will see a little down arrow and you would simply click the RTF or the rich text file formatting and save that same document in this format. This will eliminate you having to, at any point in time, go back and reformat your documents. It's a proactive step to be a lot more accessible in the work that you're doing in your online and hybrid courses. Tip number 2, it's important to add alternative text to your images. Images in the online environment oftentimes offer students to be more engaged in your online or hybrid courses. In any instance where you're using a text file, an image file in your online or hybrid course, you have to think about the fact if you're a student with a vision impairment and you can't physically make out the image, what description would you need? What text, alternative text, would you need to be able to describe to a student what actually they're seeing? So for instance, if you have an image of a young boy holding an apple, you would need to make some kind of alternative text description that says, an elementary school boy holding a red apple, so that the screen reader can then hover over that text, over that image, and read the text to the student. I think this is really critical in instances where you put in images that are specifically related to the content. So if you have a diagram of a certain concept or a diagram as it relates to a certain opportunity to explore a subject area more, you need to then go back and provide additional description for our students. Again, in tip number 2, here's an example. If you were to look in an LMS system, you see that I've noted here, there's a line for alt text. So here you would simply put in your description. Tip number 3, create testing accommodations early. I think this is one of the most proactive steps you can take in working in making your course more accessible. When you're creating a test or quiz, you often have students who have accommodations that need time and a half or double time. When you create those tests in the online environment, there are ways to create those tests with the time limit already predetermined. What I would argue is that if you take an additional step and take that same quiz, let's say you have quiz 1 that's in week 1, you put that quiz into your weekly module. You then go back and make a copy of that quiz. You change the time allotment. So for instance, if quiz 1 in week 1 should be offered to a student for 30 minutes, you may have a student that needs time and a half. So you need to create a copy of quiz 1 in week 1 and put a time limit of 45 minutes on there. You then password protect this second version of the quiz. So when you get that letter from the accommodations office in week 3 or week 4, all you need to do is go back and provide the student with the password specific to the accommodation they have. So every time you offer a test option to students, make sure that you have done this proactively. Tip number 4, make sure to take time to create accessible PowerPoints. When you use PowerPoint 2000 to 2010, you need to really consider to never use the blank template option. This is important because there are certain tagging that have been created in the layouts of the other options that allow the screen reader to read if something is a major heading, a minor heading, or if it's body of text in an actual section. So as you think about creating your options and using the templates, I really encourage you to create and use text templates that already have predefined layouts. This avoids any confusion for a screen reader. Tip number 5, I want you to think about choosing content wisely. I want you to think about choosing content that is accessible. There are a number of ways you can do this. One, you can go to this link here and you can put in any website, any site that you're going to use in your course. And you can check the site's accessibility rating. So this link allows the system to go and check how accessible the site actually is. And you would get a note back stating that this site is 45% accessible. You can also do things like use systems like NBC Learn. NBC Learn is an opportunity where faculty can curate current news articles and current webinars or different briefings, and the closed captioning and the transcriptions are available on 95% of the content. So you already know when you use something like NBC Learn that the transcripts and the closed captioning has been done for you. The last choice is when you think about using YouTube videos. There has now been greatly enhanced functionalities around closed captioning. At one point, it was in beta testing, but now you have the opportunity when you choose a YouTube video to look and see what closed captioning options are available. I will argue that it's still a little glitchy, and that if you're using closed captioning, you need to watch the video in its entirety with closed captioning on so you can see how accurate that closed caption is. Again, these are all ways to think proactively about making your content more accessible and will make the difference when students come to you and need some additional accommodations. I want you to think about other things that you can do differently. Thinking about making sure that if you're using different colors, for instance, in your online or hybrid course, that you're not choosing colors that would be prohibitive to people who have color blindness. I would also argue you need to think about people who have vision impairments, that you create a high contrast in the background and the actual text of the material. So for instance, if you have a gray background and you pick, let's say, a navy font, the contrast between gray and navy is not as sharp as black and white. So thinking about how you can highlight these elements and think through the assistive technology can really help you to think differently about these considerations. I also want to point you to a couple of other things to note. There's a great publication at this link here, daisweb.com. The publication is called From Legal Principle to Informed Practice, and it's really gotten a lot of enthusiastic reviews from faculty members, instructional designers, and the like around some practical implications around what else you can do to be thinking about accessibility. So let's talk a little bit more specifically about student support. In the Higher Education Act in 2006, as we think about student support, it's important to understand that we have to address thinking about student access, progress, and success at multiple levels. So in a hybrid and online course, this policy is really important as you think about how do you give students access to additional supports to make them successful. If you have an online student who needs additional tutoring support, what support do they have available that does not require them to come to campus? If you have an online student who's having difficulty with a writing assignment or is having difficulty with finding primary sources or peer-reviewed journal articles, what type of support are you putting into your online and hybrid courses? I've seen opportunities where institutions have addressed these things in some very creative ways. One example is an institution that took care of the library component by creating an opportunity for each faculty teaching an online and a hybrid course to develop an embedded librarian. Now, this concept meant that at least one discussion board forum throughout the session of the course was moderated and facilitated by a librarian. So instead of waiting for students to go to the library, go to the reference desk, and ask for support there, this was an opportunity for students who are working on a scholarly research paper to take their citations, take their resources, put them in the discussion board section, and get some real support from a librarian around, this is a great reference, but this isn't a peer-reviewed article, or here are the things you should be looking for as you develop those sorts of opportunities. So as you think about the quality, accountability, and the focus on student outcomes, regardless of the modality or the mode of delivery, it's really important that you think through what additional components are required for students to be successful. The other thing I want to talk about is Code 55202. When students register at Laney, it's the assumption that students are paying for a quality educational experience. In order to meet this mandate, it's important that faculty monitor student engagement with learning. This means that students are not left to educate themselves in an online environment, but rather that the faculty, the other students in the course, and the course material are critical components of the learning experience. We know that our students at Laney don't always elect to initiate contact with faculty, but the design of the online course should be done in a way that includes periodic instruction for students to receive substantive feedback to assignments, for them to be able to engage with other students in the course relevant to the academic matter. And I just want you to think about how might you describe the requirements that you have in your course that are actually meeting these standards. And what things may you do to make your course even a bit more engaging with students. I've seen institutions where faculty use virtual office hours to make opportunities more available to students. So for instance, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, that while they're grading papers, they have this Skype up, or they have, a collaboration tool available, and students can pop in, ask a quick question, can jump online, have a face-to-face web appointment with the faculty member, and get some opportunities to really be able to have true engagement and feedback from faculty. So I want you to think about that requirement of your course, or as you're thinking about making your course more web enhanced, how can you think about the course quality standard here? Again, as I mentioned earlier, instructor contact is important. So creating opportunities for other opportunities. How are students oriented to the online environment? How are students able to, find out from you what library workshops are available? What is your communication policy with students? Do you have a clear communication policy that states that you will be available for virtual office hours on Tuesday and Thursday, that in your grading policy that when submissions of papers are done, that you will turn those around in 24 to 48 hours? This is important in terms of our California legislation to be able to respond as it relates to distance education to the regular effective contact between instructors and students. And I alluded to this on the previous slide as well. So let's talk about some additional opportunities for you to be able to do that. How can you create instructor presence? One way is the online course environment. Really creating the presence from the very beginning of the course. What you want learners to be able to, experience in your online or hybrid course. So I would say to you, when you come into a classroom and you teach, you have a certain set of standards that you're bringing to your classroom. You have a certain type of expectation you have of your students. How can you recreate that same essence of that classroom experience in the online environment? You can do this through your introduction and how you orient your students to you as the instructor. You could use things like a Voki, or you could do other Second Life types of opportunities to really engage students. You could even do a Jing video where you would walk the student through components of the course, inviting them to be a part of this learning journey with you. These are all things that you are able to do in your online and hybrid environment. You could also set up announcements. I think one of the things is thinking about your communication strategy. And we all know that managing an online course really takes some great time management. But using the announcement feature in your LMS system allows you to preset announcements. So let's say every Monday and Thursday, you've preset announcements for each week. Maybe the Thursday announcement is a preparation to get the students ready for maybe something that's due on Monday. So if you preset those, you really are creating an opportunity for students to get regular, consistent feedback from you and to feel your presence in the course. Not just when you're logging in to give grades, not when you're just logging in to check and see if students are engaged in the discussion board, but they get to have a sense that you will always be there. The last thing I will note, and this may be a little controversial, but I think that this is something for you to consider and to discuss with your colleagues. We have to start thinking about meeting our students where they are. A lot of times we rely on the students to come to us in the learning management system. That has not always been as effective as meeting the students where they are. One example of that is a free technology called Remind. Remind is an electronic software that allows you as a faculty member to set up a site for your students. Students then go register for your course and put in their phone number. You don't see their phone number. They don't see any information on your end, but then you treat Remind simply like an announcement page. You go ahead and pre-script the announcements that you want to have sent out. You set them to release, and when they release, instead of going to the announcement board, they go to the student's cell phone. I've used this in my online environment, and I can tell you that this has allowed my engagement and my completion rates on assignments to go up 15%. Because what I'm doing is now meeting the students where they are. So at Friday at 5 p.m., if there's something due on Saturday night at 10, I'm saying to the student, don't forget, you have a quiz due tomorrow at 10. Make sure you give yourself some time to study, or make sure you allot the time to get the quiz done. So I'm meeting the student where they are, instead of waiting for the student to come to me. I think at the end of the day, I just want you to think about, as we conclude, that as you design your online or hybrid course, that you give some consideration to the policy implications that we've discussed. I want you to think about the types of opportunities you provide your students to engage in substantive, meaningful ways with you as a faculty member, with the course material, and other peers in the course. I want you to think about creating a format that has accessibility implications for all of your learners. So thinking about universal design. And lastly, I want you to think about the type of online presence you want to elicit for your students, and find specific ways to reinforce your instructor presence in the course, because what we know from the research is that instructor presence is the number one reinforcement that students are looking for in an online course. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to the next session.